And we are live. Try this again. And we are live. How are we doing today? If you could just validate that you can hear me, I appreciate it. Awesome. Hey, Rolls, how's it going? How's it going, sir? Thank you for joining today. So, good news, good news, good news. I did get in the rest of the parts. I just, one on the lead screws, I only got 2 out of 3, and I went and double checked, and I only ordered 2, so I have a few add to at the time. So I did put in an order for actually 2 more lead screws, so I had an extra one if one was bent. And I did order some more of the 300 millimeter linear rods. So those did come in, and I just requested a refund from the other ones that didn't come in. So all that was taken care of. I did get the rest of the parts printed, so we're good there. The other thing that I did notice is for the linear or the extrusion for the bed brace at the back is supposed to be cut to 200. I don't have a 200. I have I have all 300 in the black, or from a different project that I was working on, got some 250. So the good thing is the brackets aren't closed-ended, so we can just slide them down and we can leave them a little bit long. I don't think we'll run into any issues with this being wider than it needs to be. We just need to make sure that we put it in the right spot on the extrusion. And with that, we'll go ahead and bring the printer up and switch our camera view around so I can show you guys a little bit of what's going on. So since our last stream, the only thing that I have done is gone ahead and added our pulleys on the motors, all 3, and eyeballed them to make sure that they were lined up appropriate. We need a little bit of adjustment, but we'll see. Hey, Zombie Hedgehog, how are you doing today? Valtech has a deal for 2 12 millimeter rod bearings. Box. Do you mean ball bearings, Chewy? For ball screws? Yeah, and that's what I figured, Rolls, is it could be 300 millimeters, because I don't think it's going to come all the way up because it'll hit here. So it 300 millimeters should be fine. The 250 should be fine. So the z-axis on this thing is 300 millimeter linear rods and 300 millimeter linear lead screws, and we'll be getting into that today. Okay, linear rods set it to gotcha, Chewy. Ooh, Blob of Death in PA12. Was that that's not the Polymaker, or was that the Polymaker zombie? Yeah, so everything on the BugBu is 8 millimeters, so it's 8 millimeter linear rods and 8 millimeter lead screws. Okay. And I'll get into it in just a bit on that. So what you'll see here on the back is I do have a Meanwell power supply mounted up, and this is a LRS 350-24, and I've got a BTT SKR Mini E3 V3. This is already configured with Clipper on it, and the plan at this point, because I only have one Pi 4, and I'm trying not to put it in a printer. I do have, I can either put a CB1 module on a Pi 4 base and add in here, but I'm looking at it's really tight in here with the, for the plugs. So what I'm thinking is putting my banana Pi in here. And I'll mount this on the lower standoffs, and I can leave the USB out as kind of a dongle, as well as the antenna. So I'm going to use this. The banana Pi that I have here is a quad core, and it's basically equivalent to a Pi 3B in performance. So that should give me some more room in the control box here. I just knocked off the counter there, but so be it. And Rolls, I did get the. Let me check on chat real fast. This Polymaker PA12. Okay. Yeah, so the Z needs to be stiff, zombie, and what you've got is extrusions on all four corners, and then you've got linear rods and lead screws that are very well supported here. Can they be 10 or 12? Maybe. But once again, do we really want to over-engineer it and make it heavier than it needs to be? Yeah, so this is a pretty nice form factor. This is going to wind up, it uses a standard Creality Ender 3 bed. You don't get the full travel on it, but it will use that Ender bed. I believe the build volume was like 200 by 210 by 220, 210, 200 or something like that. Hey, Ernie TFT, thank you for the follow. How's it going? So the one thing you'll notice as I move this around is the gantry goes pretty easily and flips around a lot. So you got to watch that if you build out of order. I was building based on the initial manual, which has been revised. Rolls, thank you so much for taking all of the comments and stuff that we've made so far and getting it into an updated manual. One of the things that I was planning on suggesting as well was a change in order and basically do from a bottom up build to prevent this right here from being on there and sliding around so much and banging and crashing. And I did notice that the manual has been changed so that you would build the main frame, then you would immediately go and do the Z-axis, and then I believe the Z-axis, the belting of the Z, and then the gantry, and then the belting of the gantry. Now, once again, once we get belts on the gantry, then it's easy. It shouldn't be slinging around anymore. Did I pack it with So all of my bearings are packed with, I use super lube grease. 1 second. I'll put what I use. So this is exactly what I use. It's the super lube multi-purpose synthetic grease. Why that is. Right? And the big thing here is to make sure that it's the NLGI grade 2. This is part number 21030. Yeah, 21030. So, yeah, this works out really great when you're doing your linear bearings. And since I had a bunch of Prusa Mark IIIs, I've had plenty of the LM8 UU bearings. And then when you go to do like the LM8 LUU, like we used on the Rook, like the name of it. You just basically squeeze in from both sides and then run a rod through it, and that'll get all the grease where it needs to be. So to work on the next part, which is going to be the Z, I did do a little bit of prep work offline, and I am going to lay this down on the side because after having the gantry on, I'm going to try and use gravity in my favor here when I start laying the Z rods in. But the Z rods, it's kind of an interesting little stack here. So the bottom is going to sit into a bearing. So I added a bearing to the base, and then you've got your 20-tooth pulley with an 8mm hole, so it'll go around your threaded rod, and it's mounted with the thicker flange towards the top. Then you have a printed spacer and then another bearing. And this becomes the lower stack that'll get sandwiched between printed parts of the bearing. Then you'll have your lead screw nut. This will get installed on a printed part. We'll get that printed part on here, and then we'll add one more bearing that'll provide bearing for. And once again, that makes the Z-axis completely constrained top to bottom, but that will work out well. And so the first one that we're going to put in is the front left, based on how I have this laid down. So you're going to take your front left printed parts, and they are, once again, they are all labeled. So this says bed FL, and this is the bottom side so that the total flat portion will stick up. And what that means is our lead screw nut goes in from the bottom. We're going to install it with some M3 screws. Scoot this just out of the way a little bit so that we can get this going. And I'm just going to use M3x8s on this. All right, no problem, zombie. Definitely look away. What's that? The printed part zombie? Yeah, because the manual actually shows the pictures in the manual actually show the little arm part that the bed mounts into as being full thickness. I believe this is a latest rev on this to removes some of the thickness and weight right where the bed mounts. And when you're mounting this, it is screwing directly into plastic. There's no heat set inserts or anything like that. So we're just going straight into plastic. So as usual, when you do that, as soon as you feel the resistance, stop. Don't keep going or you'll basically strip out the plastic. And all I'm going to do is get these started, and then we'll tighten them down. Once again, you just want to just snug them up, and as soon as you feel that resistance change, you're done. Still on the spacers. Okay, and so now we have that done. The other thing we want to do is put 2 M3 nuts in here. It's going to be a lot easier to do that ahead of time. Those slipped in real nice. We go ahead and put it on our lead screw here. And I'm just going to run it all the way down to the bottom. Let's get it out of the way. And then we're going to go ahead and put our bearing in the bottom there. It should clip in nicely. And we'll have another bearing for the top. And we're just going to set that stack right in there. Line our bearings up in their cradles. We give this 1 or 2 up. Make sure our bearings are in their cradles nicely. Turn this around so that you can see what I'm talking about. Oh, maybe. All right, so we've got bearing, a lower hole, then our pulley, spacer, the other bearing that's going to be captured in the printed part, and the bearing up at the top here that's going to be captured in the printed part. And our lead screw does not protrude past the top of the printed part or the bearing, which is exactly what we need. Okay. Now we want to get our rod, linear rod, and get a bearing on that. If we're putting it on so you don't squirt out any bearings and wipe off any excess off the end there. And we're just going to lay this in place as well. Just going to rotate that over so that it sits there. And once again, the rod cannot protrude past the top past the top. So we just want to make sure that it's lined up right with the top there with our finger, and we'll be good. Once again, that's to prevent the print head from crashing into it. Now we need to get our printed part and put it in the manual real fast, which I did not write labels on these and these labels on them. So make sure that so these will go down at the bottom because the cutouts go right around the block there. That one will go right there. And then the one that doesn't have the cutout on it will go at the top. Don't believe there's a right or left on it, per se. Yeah, in-sauce would definitely work. Arm is the perfect spot. You mean down there? And all of these get put in with either M3 by 10 or M3 by 12 button head screws. So either one of your choice. And once again, you're threading into plastic. This is for the parts you don't have. Okay. And what I'm going to try and do is just get them all started, and we'll try and snug them all up at the same time. Once again, we're going into plastic, so go slow. Do not use a motorized screwdriver or anything like that. Just go by hand, and as soon as you feel the tension chain, that means you're there. You bottom the top out and you're good. Don't go any further. And I just did the half cardinal sin that I kept telling myself not to do, which was put this bottom on before I put the belt in there. So I ordered multiple types of belts from different vendors. If this will work with me. There we go. This is an 1140 GT2 or 2GT. So this is 1,140 millimeter closed loop belt, which is longer than spec. Spec is 1080 by or 1080 to 1100. There's only a handful of places that you can get those. They're all coming out of China. None of them are stocked here stateside that I'm aware of. I know Rolls was ordering multiples so that he would have some in stock. I am going to make this one work. But one of the things that you can do is hopefully just slide this up a bit, since it's not tied in down at the base, just at the top. Just going to try and slide this up and loop the end of the belt, teeth going in the right direction around that, and then put it back in place. What you do not want to do is continually pull your clamps in and out, because what that will do is over time, once again, you're going into printed parts, and over time it will strip out. So you don't want to be taking these on and off that much. $10.40 is the limit for smaller. Ask me how I know. Okay, Chewy. Yeah, like I said, the manual calls for 1080 to 1100. I do have a potential solution to make this work, even though it is a little bit longer than spec. Okay, and that right there is one side end. Go ahead and flip it over so that we can use gravity to help us on the other side. Once again, watch that gantry if you've already got it installed so it doesn't keep flipping around on you. The other thing that I'll do is, since I've got it here and ready, is I'm going to line up the bearing, and we'll add in our clamp this side. Now, once again, the nice thing about these is the clamps were designed in such a way that they only fit in one direction. And I believe we needed, is it M3 by 12 or M3 by 16 for the looking at manual screw size clamps. one of the few places in the manual rules where you have physical pictures of the clamps installed, and you call out where to put the M3 captive nuts, but you don't actually call out the actual size of the M3 screws that go in there. You don't call them out on the picture. Okay, they're M3 by 16 screws. Yeah, it's in the typed instructions at the beginning of the section, but it just doesn't list it in the actual on the pictures themselves, where you normally have all the callouts. And so once again, this is a clamp, so you'll want to get both sides started, and then just work your way back and forth to make sure that you get even clamping pressure. Okay, see, either my M3 by 16s are way off, which they're not, or they're not M3 by 16s for these. Based on where those captive nuts are, these are probably going to be M3 by 25s. 20s might do it, but it's definitely going to have to be, no, these are going to be M3 by 25s, yeah. And once again, these parts are nice, and the fact that the screw holes are offset in one direction. So this piece can only go on, other than the fact that it's got a different physical shape. It can only go on in one direction based on where the screws themselves are. Otherwise, the holes won't. That's kind of a nice little side feature of the design. So this is me. One of my nuts fell out, and I just one or downside of using black nuts, trying to see if they're actually in the hole. Once again, you're snugging these up until the gap closes. And you want to make sure that it moves easily. And we're done there. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Start off by pulling our nut off the lead screw. Mount this on our other, on the right side. Once again, it goes on the side that would have printed flat. No, it goes on the other side. It goes on the side where the goes on that side. And these can be M3 by 12s or M3 by 10s. I'm doing M3 by 10s just because I have a plethora of them. Yeah, so what's everybody working on today? Are you working on anything, or are you just watching me? Yeah, so far the build's gone well. Like I said, the original manual that I had working from, the order of build was a little off, and it was making things a little interesting because once again you get the gantry on, but it hasn't told you to put the X carriage on, and then it says run the belts. Well, I could run the belts, but they're just going to be sitting there because until you put the X gantry on or the X carriage on, there's no way of actually pulling the belts in and getting them tight. So, you know, the next rev of the manual that I got, and has that been posted, Rolls? Actually has the build order in um, a lot better order. Or once again, you'll build from the bottom up. You got your CAN bus working on your switch wire. That's awesome, Chewy. Yeah, I've got the CAN bus and everything in place on the 0G. I just need to basically cut the wires and re-terminate the tool head at it and then do the 4-wire umbilical up to it. I've kind of been slow rolling it just because I've been printing stuff on that printer. But that's about to be done. I had to print some things for my mother for church for Easter, so that's almost done. And then I'll be able to just go ahead and work on getting other stuff printed and need to put a bearing at in the bottom trap of this. Rotate this around a bit. I put a bearing in the bottom trap, and I've got my part ready going. You see I just lifted that belt up so I can get the belt around it. Save myself a step. Without having to keep pulling the rods up and out, up and out, up and out. So I got that. We need one more bearing that will be added to the top of this to hold this in place. We'll need our other LM8 bearing on a rod. off the excess goop. Set this in place. Go ahead and lay this back over on its side. So once again, I got gravity working with me, not against me. Just make it a little bit easier getting everything lined up. I did throw the other bearing on there. Get that trapped at the top. So we have our bearing. No easy way to show that. I guess if I flip this completely around. So the bearings in the bottom piece are 8mm inner diameter 20-tooth pulley, spacer, another bearing that provides the stability at the bottom, bearing at the top, right up to the top, our LM8 UU rod, excuse me, our 8mm rod with our LM8 U bearing, and that's lined up with the top of the piece here. Now we're going to grab our other bottom piece, which is the one that has the cutout on it. That's going to lay over here. Top piece will be the other long one without a cutout. Line that up and lay it on top. And then it's just a matter of grabbing our M3x10s and putting them in place. Hey, Silverback Creations, how are you doing today, sir? We are just working on our BugBu build. This is the BugBu 210 version. It uses a standard Creality heated bed. 8mm rods for the X, Y, and Z. 8mm lead screws. They are TR8 8s. You're seeing this rock a lot. It's really just the workbench itself that it's on. It is not that crooked, I promise you. The wrinkle in your brain this morning. You did your first PID tune, okay. And power went out 3 times. Yeah, exactly. My power went out 4 times yesterday, and it was rather annoying. When you've had multicolored prints going and it fails on the last color change because of a power outage, it really torques you. I might be able to print the numbers and letters out separately and glue them on. But this is the Rocky Mountain Rep Fest logo for 2023. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, that would suck. My OCD is allowing me to swap between black and silver screws, but I'm having to put them all together. I can't mix them. So I've got silver at the bottom and black at the top. One of these days I'll go through and I will get all the same type of screw. You know, Silverback, this really isn't that hard of a build. It really is pretty easy. And once again, I had a few issues printing the parts, but I printed everything in ABS. And well, really the green is ASA and the orange is ABS. And the only real issues I had was with the ASA printing. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over on its back now. Need to add our clamp on this side. And once again, these were M3 by 25 screws. And I had forgotten to put my captive nuts in, so hopefully we can get those in. The only real issue is going to be getting them to go. So we can just pick it up like that, and that should put them all the way down at the bottom. And once again, our clamps are in such a way that they will only go on and line up in one direction because of this. And these holes printed really, really nice. Rolls, I know you made a comment before about having to work on those. A lot of times they'll make M3 holes exactly M3. And then when you print them, even though you're using like captive nuts in this case, you wind up basically threading through the entire part to get to the nut. And that is just a major pain in the butt when you're trying to, if you ever have to do any maintenance and take something apart. I really appreciate you getting these parts really sized right. Okay, so 2 down, 1 more to go. So set this on its back. This will sit a little wonky because I got way too much stuff already installed on the back. You want to make sure that your belt's kind of laid in there right. It's going to go around the pulley, and then back side of the belt's going to go around your tensioner. So, you know, just try and get it laid in the appropriate spot so you know about where it's going to go. And you'll need your third rod set up. And I always have to look at this one to see lay in there, and the bearing's going to go that way. So it's just trying to make sure I know which way to mount this particular. So the printing orientation for this calls for it to be on the bed like this. I got an extremely, extremely ugly edge here. I don't know if it's a fan that's kind of bad on my side or what, but I did print this laying down and use tree supports. So it is a little ugly down there. I could go through with like my file and just make it a little bit better, but I did trial fit a piece of the 2020 extrusion in there, and it fits just fine. It's nice and snug, so it's not going to have any problems. And this is printed with my standard boron settings, so it's going to be plenty strong, even printed in that orientation. Some more 3x10s. Yeah, and really it should be able to go in nice and easy peasy and go all the way in, so that it's just so much easier to assemble when you, especially the ones I hate is when you're working on a like a hot end, and you've got a 30 millimeter long M3 screw, and it's threading through plastic the whole way to get to the end where you're putting a nut on the, and it's just, that drives me crazy because that's a pretty long screw to have to sit here and screw all the way in and out. And of course, it's normally the one screw that by the time you realize it, it's like, man, I've got this thing 3/4 together. I don't want to take it apart. So you just deal with it. Yeah, a lot of it depends on how many parts you already have. Um, I will list all the parts on my, it'll be on the YouTube page because um, I get more text on the description, but I bought all of the extrusions off of Amazon. Rolls says to get a 10 pack and then a 4-pack because you need, I think, 12 or 13 of them. I went ahead and just got 2 10-packs, so I had extra. And you'll need your 300 millimeter lead screws and linear rods. And then, like hot end stuff, it all depends on how much you have. Like I'm going to reuse, I think I'm going to put my 24 volt E3 V6 on here. And I do have a CHC heater for it, so I may swap that out, or I may leave it the way it is just to get it printing and going. And maybe do that as a mod down the road. The You can use a SKR Pico, you can use an SKR Mini E3V3, which is what the config files are already built for. I believe he's working on the Manta M4P, M4 or M5P, which will be an all-in-one type board. But it's like anything else. You can spend as little or as much as you want on your build. And I would suggest build it for what you can afford to start with, and then mod it, because everything's easily moddable on this thing. Yeah, there's not a mount for an Ender 3 hot end on this yet. I say yet because I'm sure somebody will come up with one. Once again, I just popped a 608 bearing in there. And I'm making sure that my belt is at least loosely around the motor. Comes up across the tensioner pulley, and then it's going to go around this pulley when I put it in place. I'll need one more 608 bearing up here. Now I went and bought some, well, let me rephrase that. I already had in my bench stock 608 ZZ bearings and 608. These are the RS bearings, which have the black rubber shield, or you can get them with blue rubber shields or red or whatever. The ZZ bearings have metal inserts on the side, and they're really not made to be opened up. But these, you can open them up, flush them out, and re-grease them if you need to. So it's just something for awareness. Just trying to make sure I got it appropriately. And really, what I did off screen was I laid the rod in here like this and made sure that all three of these were lined up, because I measured over for the top and the bottom. So these were lining up, but getting this bottom perfectly aligned, it really helps having the lead screw in here with the bearings to help get this bottom part completely aligned right. So case in point, and then you'll have your LM8 UU bearing, your linear rod. Once again, I've cleaned and pre-greased these bearings using an appropriate super lube with PTFE on them. See, there's plenty of extra goop that comes out of these. So you just take and wipe that off. Sure it's kind of and that these can line up. Once again, as always, if you're going to have extra length on these, which you will, you want it to be at the bottom down here, not at the top. Nothing goes above the top printed part here. These clamps are pretty much identical. So go at the top, go at the bottom. Just need to get our M3 by 10 screws. Actually, I believe these are slightly different. I think one's a little thicker than. Yeah, and as far as the bomb's pretty good. The like number and types of screws and stuff. He's pretty good at saying, okay, this can be an M3 by 10 or an M3 by 12. And the nice thing about that is if you've already got, like I had a bunch of M5 by 10s from doing some previous builds. So I just use M5 by 10s instead of M5 by 12s for doing all of the body mount. And they work just fine. Not a single problem or hits with them. Oh, that's where my OCD is going to get me. I just put the wrong color screws. I technically don't have OCD. It's never diagnosed. Yeah, definitely silverback. And in fact, I mean, um, you will have to. Right, I shouldn't say you will have to. You're going to have long lead times on certain things. Like we've found that the belts have been a long lead time item because they're all coming from China to get the specific size that we need for this build. So, you know, get those on order first, or anything that you want to buy from Ollie, get those on order first because those are going to be the long poles in the tent. And then the stuff that you buy from Amazon, I'll say just make sure that I'm putting the same things right back in. Like, what the heck am I doing? Why you guys let me do this? Yeah, but the 300 millimeter linear rods, screws, lead screws, um, get those off of Amazon, and they'll be there within a couple of days. They're not too expensive. The Element UU bearings, you know, buy them, rinse them, repack them. They'll be good. Yeah, and the the bed, of course, is a Creality bed. So you have a few options there for those. One of which would be how close is a Micro Center to you? Because I believe they have those beds at Micro Center. So I am going to go ahead and put this in the bottom on the side. Now you see how I've got the belts running, so it goes around this pulley to this pulley, comes up, and the back side goes around the smooth pulley on your tension rope, and it goes around this pulley down to this pulley. And it's all kind of loose right now. What we're going to do is try and pull it as tight as we can by moving the Z motor out. That'll be as tight as we can get it. Yeah, if you can get an Ender 3 for parts, I mean, that'll get you motors. Now, the problem that you'll have with the Ender 3 is depending on which one you get, is whether or not you get motors with pressed on pulleys or motors that have the D flats cut on them. Because you need the D flats. If you've got the pressed on pulleys, 9 times out of 10, they will not line up with where you need them to be. Okay, so you see I still have a lot of slack in this, and it doesn't matter where I move this tensioner, it's not going to tension it up enough. So I do have another option where I can cut a short piece of extrusion and mount it right here with a tensioner piece that will allow me to tension it up from the front between these two pulleys. So it'll be just like that. And that's something that I saw on it's a tensioning mechanism I saw for a triple lead screw on a D-bot, right? So this will actually allow me to tension this up. And theoretically, I only need this to be 200. But if I take this out on the chop saw and cut this down to 200, I now have a 10 centimeter length that I can use to put here with a couple of corner brackets. And then I'll have a printed piece with another pulley that'll sit underneath that I will use to tension this belt up. Okay, so that's one way to get around if you've got an extra long belt because you couldn't find the 1100s, but you don't want to go like really, really crazy long either. Yeah, and the Ender 3 for parts, I mean, you can buy Ender 3s fairly cheap. If you have a micro center nearby, you can go in and potentially buy them when they're like $99. I'm telling you, I get a bunch of used ones off of eBay, and I'm getting them for less than 80, 90 bucks. They're used, but I know pretty much all I'm using them for is a frame and the motors. All the V-wheels and stuff were pretty much getting chucked anyhow because it's been going on my Enderwire builds. So Red Dragon, Blue Dragon, which is sitting in the closet right now, that'll go over here in a little bit. Yeah, everything's gone to linear rails, and yeah, it just works out really well. I'm not sure what the mount it on front pointing out would be. Not sure what that comment was about. Okay, so the other thing we need to do here is add our last clamp over here. So once again, that'll be the M3 by 25 screws. Other clamp. And hopefully make sure that my captive nuts in there stayed put. Or since I didn't put captive nuts in there, I will put nuts in there. And then they will stay put. Yeah, you mean take this tensioner and put it in the front? Pointing outwards? Maybe. That might work. So you'll have something sticking out the front of your printer, which I don't know if aesthetically that will be too pleasing. And a lot easier to do without having power supply and stuff, but I tried to. The only reason I have the power supply and stuff mounted on this Silverback is I was just trying to kind of get ahead of the game. Now the rear ones can definitely be M3 by 16. Just going to make sure that all of those are down. So that belt, once again, is loose. I'll have to do some cutting on a extrusion piece for the bed, and that'll get mounted in here, and that'll give me a 100 millimeter length left over that I can put in the front to put that other pulley in. That'll tighten this up some, and that will leave the front. So it'll look like this, and I'll leave the front with plenty of room for a monitor. I think this will work right here very nicely. Putting that excess cut extrusion at the front, making sure your belts are all lined up. And the rain just started, guys, so hopefully it doesn't impact the stream. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do is use an extra smooth eyler that I have here. I got an extra GT smooth eyler, and that'll, like I said, it'll go on a printed part that'll mount underneath the extrusion that'll come forward here. That'll just be mounted with 2 corner brackets. And so it'll just be basically like that. And that'll hold everything up appropriately. So so we got the bed mounts, we got the Z-belt in place, but we can't truly tension it just yet. And honestly, I've got an 1100 millimeter belt. It's somewhere stateside. It's apparently been sitting in New York for several days. So we'll see what happens there. We got the bed mounts in place. We got motor in place. We don't have the final tension yet. We'll do a mod to do that, or we can wait until the new belt. It may get in before Tuesday, and we'll just do a belt swap offline. It does talk about mounting the printed bed at this point. I won't, because I need to cut one of these down, which will give me the extrusion piece I need here. So I'll do that between now and Tuesday. That, and I don't want to add any more weight to the printer just yet until I kind of want to wait and put the bed on last. That makes sense. And okay, so this is good. We had this discussion last time of whether it's two bearings and one bearing, a la a Prusa Mark III style or not. And it was weird because the CAD drawing showed 2, but the photos showed 1 and 1. I think if you go 1 on 1, you'd really want to use like Element UUs. Go through and just double check, see. Okay, yeah, so I see your note, and once again, Rolls, the issue we have with the notes that are on the photos in the manual is that it's red text and it's hard to read. So it's funny because the picture shows 1 and 1, but your comment does show another box next to it to say basically 2 at the top. So how much slack's coming out the front? If I were to come out the front, I mean, it's on this particular belt, it's still a good deal. I mean, I'm doing an extrusion one way or the other on this one. If I go out the front, I need to use a tooth belt. And it gives me fewer teeth that are actually on these, and it may interfere with the printed part. So really going forward and using a smooth idler will be the best in this case. And once again, this is an option if you go with an 1140. If you get, the other one I've seen that's pretty common was an 1164. And I mean, you'd almost have to have an extension out to the middle to do that. So, yeah. Yeah, it looks smaller, but it really isn't once you pull in the slack of everything else. And once again, this is with the motor fully in the back position. Yeah, I wonder if it wouldn't be better to crop the photo and then put the text in the white space on the side. I think that itself would probably be a little bit better, Rolls, as far as making those annotations. So in this case, we now are ready to put our print head, or excuse me, our X carriage in place. You've got the X back and the X front. And we're going to put these together with 4 screws, 2 in the top, 2 in the bottom. And these are M3 by 30s. And it says to put these together with nuts in the back. And like anything else, whenever I go to do that, if there's no captive nut in the back, or yeah, the nuts on this will not be captive nuts. So I'm going to put them on there with lock nuts, just because I'm sure there's going to be some vibration on this part. And I don't want said vibration to actually cause the bolts to come loose mid-print. And then we have a potential for a hot end to fall into a print. So if we're going to do it, I just feel safer putting lock nuts on these. Rather than having a hot part potentially fall off on something. And these are also something, see if I can show you. These really don't stick out too much because there's no clamping force being applied just yet. So really, M5 by 30s would be easier to assemble. However, then you wind up having a lot sticking out the back, and that may interfere with other parts. So just know that you've got to put these on a couple of threads and then work to, in a crossing pattern, to tighten them down so that you get a good tight clamp around your LM8U bearings, and you're not going to cause any issues with over tightening that'll cause a bearing to bind. Bit of a pain, it takes a little bit, but it's really a lot better in the end. Kind of just take your time. I mean, I think you probably have enough too that if you used M3 by 35s and added a washer at the front, yeah, you'd probably be able to do M3 by 35s on here, Rolls. And I would just add a washer under the front bolts, just to spread out because you're going through plastic and you're clamping onto plastic. Putting a washer on the front and back, one will take up a little bit of space, but two will prevent sucking the bolt into the part. Um, just something to think about. And that, I mean, you still got at least a millimeter to go on the back of these bolts. Once again, I know you were calling for X bolts. I would rather see these, if you're going to stay with bolts back here, make them captive nuts so that they're embedded in the plastic. There should be plenty of space and meat in these plastic parts to do that. I would almost embed the both the nuts in the back and countersink the screw heads on the front like you did on the gantries. And yeah, that's what I was afraid of, was the hot end carriage. That's why if you sink these in, there's plenty of meat in these side pieces here, that if you countersunk, you know, flush mounted or countersunk the nuts in the back and then countersunk the head, you go down to an M3 by 25, which we're already using in other places, and you could do it where it winds up being a flush front and back, and then you don't have any problems with anything else that mounts on the front. Because once again, like your hot end carriage mounts to the front, and you've got to be careful that it's between the bolts and stuff, right? This is the front. Set in right. Bolts go into the back. This is going to be the front. So yeah, your hot end mount goes up and down like that. Heck, that could even allow you to make this piece a little narrower if those would be captive inside of it. Just something to think of. Yeah, if you inset the nut like you set up back here, I just need to these just have the 1 or 2 layers for printability, so I just need to run a screw or a drill through it, open that up. But boom, we're good. If you guys will give me 1 second, I did hear my wife just raise the garage, and I need to figure out, my parents were coming over, so I'm gonna put you guys on mute real fast, and I will be right back. Please talk amongst yourselves. But I want to go back and double check and see if family just showed up. All right, gang, I'm back, and yes, my family has showed up, so we may call this one short, so we can get out and go have some fun. The next thing that we're going to do is run belts. I do have plenty of belt material here. And Rolls, one other thing, your outlet box, besides the fact that mine's warped, then I have to reprint it. I haven't tested to see if the outlet fits. I'm assuming it does. But where did you foresee this box being mounted? Because over here you have this box. It can't really go back here because of this motor. And then unless I slide this like way up, there's no room underneath for this to mount. And it really, it's not big. It's not, it's too big to go and mount underneath either. So I'm not sure where you were seeing this getting mounted. And then again, one other suggestion is I'm assuming three big motors, or three standard motors, a small motor, and electronics. How would you like the BugBu and do a brick? Take this added mass and weight off, do a brick with a DC input that you can add a short pop out for to mount right here in the back. You can do a clamp mount like they did on the BugBu. But for that matter, I could add a drop mount somewhere on here for it. And now you have DC power that you can run straight up into the board and run your Raspberry Pi off of a UART connection. So your Raspberry Pi is getting power from the board. Hey, Pete Savis, how you doing? Yeah, that might be easier because it doesn't sit up high enough that you can mount it underneath. Now on back left, do you mean it's kind of like mounted over here? Because once again, I like the way it's designed, but it would have to mount something like this because of your corner braces. The other thing you could do is actually design the box into one of the legs. So just extend the printed part out, into a straight box so that you can mount it basically right up in the corner, one way or the other, either vertically or horizontally. But just build it into one of the mounts, because that would take up less space because it's already secured. You just need to have the socket piece. And if you do it like on the back left mount, you can either have it hung under or hung over, and it'll be right there. And that's a thought. Okay, you're going to post an image to the Discord, which I don't have. Hopefully not. And I know I said I was going to do everything in orange. I may reprint these because I did get some. Like that side came out pretty good, but this side was a little jank, so I may reprint this part. Or I've got a set in the graphite black, but I've printed out the parts for the Sherpa Mini, but I also printed out the parts for the Sherpa Micro. And if anybody has a good set of eyes, you may notice there's something a little bit different about this one. So this is a mod by Annex Engineering that will allow you to mount a end stop right here on the end. And your lever this the this top oval would be for the tensioning screw. The top 3mm hole is for a screw. So you would have it, your tensioner mounted in there, and you'll have it tensioned, and you'll use the screw, and it'll push on the nub of the end stop, right? Because you'll take the lever off of the end stop, and when filament goes in, it'll push the tension arm out ever so slightly, and it will release the end stop, and that becomes your filament sensor. So you'll now have a filament runout sensor right at your extruder. And if you're using any type of multi-material unit, you now have a filament runout sensor or a filament sensor, presence sensor, right at your gears. So it'll work for any type of MMU or just standard runout. So yeah, exactly, and it's basic and simple. It's just a standard end stop, and like I said, it's a standard end stop, and all you do is pop the lever off, and you just use the actual moment switch of the end stop with the screw. But like I said, I do have material, or I do have belt here. There should be plenty of belt. If not, I think I ordered some more, and it's over here as well. Once again, ordered it. This is Bisect GT2 6mm timing belt, 5 meters from Amazon. So I should have plenty here. If not, I can use this. And I know this is from KB3D, and I know this is actual Gates. Whoops, kind of hard to see there, but it is Gates timing belt. I know this is genuine Gates. The other thing is all your BMG internals. I got the kit from Polished. It works out well. I did test fit the 50-tooth gear to see if I needed to sand it, because some of them, if you get the really, really crappy generic ones, the end of the gear would stick out. And if it does, what'll happen is it will drag on your motor. So you would normally have your bearing that's press fit into the back plate. So bearing, press fit into the back plate. This will go into that bearing. And you want to make sure that the back end of this does not stick out past the printed part. If it does, it will rub against the face of your motor, and it will cause you all kinds of problems. And then you will wind up increasing your power, thinking that it's an issue where you don't have enough power to your motor, and then you'll overdrive your motor and either blow the stepper driver itself, burn the motor up. But in all essence, what you're going to do is you're going to grind a hole in the front face of your motor. As Chewy said, ask me how I know. Done it before. And then I wound up taking it all apart, and there's a jig that you can print off. I don't know, there's several of them out there that you can print off that'll basically allow you to captive this, and then basically just sand it flush with some 80 grit sandpaper. So things to be aware of. press fit that bearing in there. Graphite. We'll see. We'll figure that out. But that, I think, folks, is where we'll start off on Tuesday. I may just go ahead and run the belts because running the belts isn't all that exciting. And I'll get the extrusion piece cut down so that we'll have a proper 200 millimeter extrusion for the rear bed mount. And that will also give us an extra 100 millimeter length that we can use for this front tensioning bracket that we'll add. So I think that's going to be great. And as you see, that leaves me with, if I'm only going to use one of these, that leaves me another 7 extrusions that I can use for something else. So yeah, always good to have extra parts that you can always use and go, well, I've got all these parts. It's not too much more to get parts for the next printer build. And who knows, I have recently gotten in a couple of rolls of Polymaker Metallic Red PLA Pro. I believe that was PLA Pro, wasn't it, Chewy? So now I get to make the decision of, do I want to make a red version of these? Do I print red parts and wait for the 310 to be released? Or, what do I do? What do I do? We'll see. Or does it become the next helmet? Because once again, we're getting close and I'm getting hounded by a couple of people to finish my helmet. I did get the tubes that came in for the breather apparatus. Let me go ahead and switch cameras. Use this. So this is our Warhammer 40,000 Chaplain's helmet. Just realized why the lighting's been so bad. We do have the earpieces printed. We do have like cutouts so that they are key slots, I should say. And then there's also a knob at the back. Like I said, not locking in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use chrome to print the actual studs, the center studs that go on the temples. And I have the tube holders in black, and I'll add the tubes. There's a couple of embellishments on the front that I need to print a couple more chrome pieces. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of sanding to get rid of some of the overhang lines. And then I'll go ahead and gloop this all together. And this will then be taken down to the local game store to see what everybody thinks of my Warhammer 40,000 helmet. I may even get talked into sanding it, priming it, and painting it. We'll see about that. So yeah, I think that's where we're going to start. Once again, sorry for the short stream, but I am noticing that I'm starting to get some drop frames, so the weather is going to start impacting the quality of the stream. And I do have some family that showed up, so we are going to go ahead and call it for today. Were you sending that as a direct post, or no, you didn't? You did post something. Okay, so you mounted your box kind of like just that. Whoops. So you mounted your box over here, so it was just kind of out of the way. And once again, I flipped mine. I think you have yours up where um, the power wires are at the top. I prefer to have them at the bottom. So one, they're a little bit further out of the way. I may be up here playing with the gantry. So I want mine at the bottom, and I can run them through right up the large hole on the side, and up, try and keep things streamlined there. I did break the side parts here on my box when I was trying to clean up some of the overhangs. So I don't think I'm going to reprint it though. I think I'm just going to use that as some extra ventilation. But yeah, this can definitely mount at the side, or I may potentially bring this over some more. I don't think I'll let it mount there either. I don't know, we'll figure something out. Or like I said, I may get rid of this altogether and just go to a standalone brick and just have the DC jack hanging down in the back. You know, hang it from the inside edge. So if I take there's a clamp mount that we did for the the rook. And if I use that and mount it like right here on the inside, it'll be protected from the back. It'll be able to plug in, and then I can run those wires straight up and into the back of the box. So it'll be somewhat out of the way. I can either do it from the back or from the side. The only difference is there's no switch at that point. It's just plug it in or unplug it. So, all right, gang. Well, that's it for today. Let me go ahead and figure out is online right now that we can raid over into. Once again, Saturday mornings are really slim pickings as far as who's online, huh? Yeah, so it would be here, let me set this down. We'll just bring this back up. So we got the Mercury 1 up here rolls, and all it is this little piece here. It's a little two-piece clamp, so it connects to the front, and then it clamps from the bottom around the DC jack. It just takes a barrel connection, and it comes out with 2 wires that you run right to your board. This is the Pico with a Raspberry Pi 0W. Not a 02, it's just standard 0W. One I pulled out from my Prusa when I converted my Prusas over to the 2s. So yeah, it's just a standard brick. And this is a 24 volt, 8 amp power supply. And it's a BX. I would show you, but I know the lighting. Well, I think it's not too bad there. BX 2408. So it's a it's 240 volt power supply. Power brick is what it is. So that's another option rather than having the big power supply on the back, which adds weight to the printer. I mean, if you could put the electronics underneath, that would be great, but that's the downside of running the triple lead screw like you do, is you have a belt down there, so you really can't put anything on the bottom, so it needs to go in the backpack. But when you do a backpack like that, then it starts getting a lot of weight and stuff. And well, like I said, this is I want to say this was 225 or 240. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but it works well. The power supply for a standard Ender 3 is what, a standard 250? So it should work fine. And like I said, guys, I do need to get ready to bang out of here. Um, we've got Ratskis playing Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Spinning Moon is printing. You see it, what he's up to. He didn't really have anybody on there. Yeah, it's, like I said, it's slim pickings this morning. Let's just jump over to Chris Perillo. And maybe next weekend we'll run a little bit longer and we'll have more options of people that are online at that point. But yeah, it's just unfortunately slim pickings as far as who's actually online at the moment. No, it's not an AC bed on the Rook. You can use an AC bed on the Rook. In fact, the Rook doesn't call for a heated bed at all because it's designed to just be a PLA printer. There's no requirement for a heated bed on a Rook. I am running a heated bed, and it's just like, I mean, it's the same thing as the Boron, and in fact, the Rook, that's pretty much the same setup as the Boron, because it's got an XY motor, it's got a Z motor, though it's belted versus a lead screw. It's running an SKR Mini E3 or a Pico and a Raspberry Pi. It's a 200 or 250 on the Voron V0, so it should work just fine. Should work just fine. If I have any heat up issues at all, then I'll consider swapping it back out because it's not like it's a huge major deal to unscrew 2 wires from the board and pull the DC jack and then, you know, mount the other one back. Well, I might leave the other one mounted until I make sure that the DC jack works. So, yep. And like I said, we're going to jump over to Chris Perillo. All right, so yeah, thanks all for being here and showing up today. I wanted to make a little bit more progress, hopefully do some more belts and stuff, but like I said, I'm fighting some weather and I'm watching more drop packets and frames as I go. And I just had family show up, so let me go spend some time with some family. We'll see you all Tuesday night at 5 p.m. My hope is I will have the extrusion cut so that we can get the bed mount done and I'll show you what I did. I'll probably do the tensioner extension off stream and just show you guys what I did after the fact. And I will probably, unless everybody really wants me to, I'll probably just build the Sherpa Mini offline. Because quite honestly, I'm debating whether I wanted to do a Sherpa Mini or a Sherpa Micro. But I'm pretty sure I'll have to do the Mini or do an adapter plate because the Micro is a slightly different mounting hole size. So, like I said, we'll still do the whole hot end build and mount, but I may just go ahead and have the extruder pre-built prior to the stream just to make things go over. Right? Cool deal. We're getting close to the end. Once again, I am going to try and push through and get it done, and then maybe we'll do the CHC as an after thing because my V6 is already heat tightened and I don't want to have to get it plugged in, heat it up, pull the nozzle, put the CHC on, get the nozzle back on, heat tighten, you know, it's everything. So, yep, got to start the raid. So, yeah, we'll do that and maybe do some upgrades down the road on this. Thank you very much. I have started the raid over to Chris Perillo. And so we should be heading out now. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. See you over there on the other side.